Welcome to another edition of the Connor and Mark Show. Today, we welcome you in. We're recording this here on Friday and dropping it as it's premiering here on our YouTube page at Saturday at about 10:30. Obviously, Connor is not here today, but filling in his role is Ryan Powell. And Ryan, welcome to the show. And on short notice, thanks for hopping on with me, buddy.
Yeah, how you doing today, Mark? I got some big shoes to fill in with Connor Gabe with post-graduation and everything. So I'm excited to hop on today and talk some Philly sports.
Heck yeah. And as Ryan just alluded to, it is Connor's graduation day, wrapping up finals and everything like that this week. So congratulations to him. Obviously, he'll be back next week, but diving into it, Ryan. I mean, we got a lot on the docket here today. We had the Flyers wrap their season up last week. Obviously, huge disappointments there, and we'll dive in really what the future of this team looks like, who may be around next year with the expansion draft, free agency, potential trades with the upcoming NFL and NHL draft, and all of these sort of factors that may change this team dynamic up next year. Then we'll dive into some Sixers as they head in. 2 games remaining after we record this. There'll be one game as they do play tonight, which is Friday night against the Magic. Then they'll wrap up the season Sunday against the Magic again. Right now, their Magic number sits at 1 to clinch that number 1 seed as they dropped 2 games to Indiana and then the last game to Miami. Again, not really a great game, kind of disappointing. We'll dive into that. And then the last 2 things on the docket is going to be these Phils looking a little better as of late. And to wrap it up, we'll do some Eagles as their schedule was released this week. And I know you said, Ryan, before the show, you could see them making the playoffs. And not going to lie, as I stepped back, I kind of saw the same thing with this team. A lot of young talent and even short up some positions. I mean, really, they have a lot to shore up, but short up some positions with some veteran players like Anthony Harris and bringing in some guys, obviously Hargrave on the defensive end, looking for some more out of him. So a lot to dive into, but let's kick it off here, Ryan, with the Flyers. And, I'm just going to throw it out there. It obviously performed way below expectation. Didn't finish below 500. They finished with a record at 25-23-8. With 58 points, landing them in the 6th spot in this East Division. Obviously, again, very disappointing, just 2 spots ahead of the New Jersey Devils. And then I don't even know if you could call the Buffalo Sabres a real NHL hockey team this year. And they obviously finished in last in the entire NHL. And before I throw it over to you, Ryan, I mean, last year, looking at this team, they were in prime position to win the Stanley Cup. Pretty sure they had the best odds before the COVID pause to win the Stanley Cup against, the other team that was really close with them was the Avalanche. But a total downturn and a total 360 this year from last year's. The record was 41-21-7, 89 points, and 3rd place in the Eastern Conference. So they were sitting pretty last year. Obviously not the case this year. And in my eyes, it was a combination of everything. Obviously starting with the goaltending, Carter Hart was not the player that he was last year. Obviously, before the COVID pause, he had, I believe, the best home record, undefeated in the month of February, went 12-0. He did not even come close to any of those numbers this year. And real quick, before I hop off this point, he finished 9-11-5 this year with a 3.67 goals against average and a .877 save percentage. And on the flip side, last year he finished 24-13-3, 2.42 goals against average, and a .914 save percentage. So before I go any further, Ryan, what was your main takeaway of this team this year? And what's maybe something that you're looking at next year or a potential change that needs to happen to get this team back on the winning track?
Well, I mean, I think number one I'm going to say is I think COVID really hit this team very, very hard. I mean, they came out the gates the first 2 to 3 weeks, and they were like in 2nd or 3rd place in this really, really hard Mass Mutual East. I think that's what it was called this past season. But I mean, overall, I mean, it's 2nd year with AB running the system. They were limited with practice. It was tons of back-to-back. And honestly, looking at this team, it was the defense, and it was a snowball effect that led right into Carter Hart. Carey Price had a really, really bad second year too, and that no one really brought that up this year. And his defense at Montreal in 2010, when they made that Eastern Conference final run against the Flyers, that was really carried that team. And they had Halak, but not we didn't talk about Carey Price. And then looking at this Flyers team, I just think Hart really didn't trust anyone on defense. There's too many turnovers, stupid mistakes, and we saw that throughout the year. The inconsistency from Ghost. Ghost would go like a week where he looked phenomenal, his rookie year self, and then he would look like he belongs in the AHL. I'm curious to see the direction of this team heading forward. I know the day after the season ended against the Devils, it was great to end on that note too, with Farabee finishing the year with 20 goals. I think that's huge for him to build off his confidence. Connectny was
very big.
Connectny was finally finding his legs. But Mark, if you really look at this, a normal season, this is like the typical Flyers, staying average around 50 games a season, and then they get very, very hot the last stretch, and they either make the playoffs by 2 points or they miss it by a couple points. And it's been like that since that Jeff Carter and the Mike Richards, when they blew up that duo up 10 years ago now. So Chuck Fletcher already stated today on Friday that AV will not get fired. And I think that's the perfect move. Let him roll with this team one more year. We know this team, the top six, people are saying to blow them up. But I saw a tweet by one of the Flyers beat writers. They said that the Flyers were the only team in the NHL this year who had 7+ forwards who scored 30+ points. So, I mean, the top six is perfectly fine. And we just really need to, simmer down and really look at this defense and the penalty kill, because that really what killed us. And I think if we can get this defense back to how it was playing when Niski was on this team, and I mean, it was just one player, but still, he did so much. And I think Pro wasn't ready to take that big of a step with not having a full training camp, practice, etc. Players were hurt, Sanheim, and you throw in Sam Morin, who was in training camp as a left winger, and then you throw him back on defense, and then goes in and out of the lineup. Mark Friedman, when he was a Flyer, in and out. Cam York was coming up. So the inconsistency of this team on defensively was really played a domino effect with Hart. And I believe this Carter Hart will come back next year very, very strong and hungry. And I'm happy that they shut him down just to let him clear out his mind and, get ready for this season. Because in my opinion, you really look at next year's season and it's going to be a make or break on what this future of this team really is.
Yeah. And those are all great points, Ron. I mean, a lot to unpack with this team. And when a team, specifically in the Flyers case, goes from being so good and so highly regarded the 1 year going into the playoffs as a Stanley Cup contender favorite, and then this year missing the playoffs, really just not finding any traction or really anything to their game. There's going to be a lot to talk about and a lot to figure out. And just to touch on those defensive deficiencies that this team really, really hit hard this year. I mean, when I say really hit hard, this number right here is going to define that and magnify it even more. Nolan Patrick, -30 on the season. And he's supposed to be one of these big, obviously not offensive producing forwards, but more of a Sean Couturier type role where he's a good defensive center and he takes care of the business in the defensive end, and he lets his line mates translate it in the offensive end. -30, that is just awful. And to continue the list, I mean, you look at a young defenseman in Sanheim and Myers, and Sanheim respectfully -22 and Myers -10. So as you look at these numbers, and for people who may not be, totally in sync with the plus and minuses, basically when you're on the ice, it's a minus. When you're on the ice, it's a plus. And -30 means you're really, really on the ice for probably more than 80% of the goals scored against your team. So I think that's going to be something that this team's going to have to look at. And moving forward here, looking at the free agents this year, this team's looking at, and this kind of ties hand in hand with your point, Ryan. the two UFAs are going to be Brian Elliott and Alex Lyon. We saw them get a lot of time at the end of the season, and Hart gets shut down. I mean, I believe partly Hart got shut down due to his play and really just, no light at the end of the tunnel in the sense of no reason to really play him. You're not going to the playoffs. But I believe they're going to go with Lyon over Elliott just because Elliott's an older player. He got a lot of traction on his wheels this year. I think he played or started more games than Hart, and then he came in relief in a good amount. So there's a lot going on with this Flyers team. When you look at the RFAs, restricted free agents, you have Carter Hart, Nolan Patrick, Travis Sanheim, and Carter Terwinski. So not a lot of work to be done in the re-signing phase of this season. Obviously, they're probably going to tenure some of those guys and maybe, I think they're going to give Hart an extension. Patrick, I'm not too sure about. They might do, leave it to next season and see if there's a potential team that would want to pick him up. And Sanheim, I think he's going to have a rebound year. So a lot going on with this team. And just the last thing I want to leave off with this team, and I'll let you go with anything else you have, Ryan. But Kevin Hayes, obviously bringing him in before last season. He had a great season last year. Obviously setting the world on fire. We expected everything and more this season from him. He had the Philly energy, the Philly attitude. Everyone in this city loved him. And this year just really did not live up to that 7-year, I believe, 7 AAV salary that he was granted. But this year, obviously, I'm pulling his stat line up here, but a guy getting paid $7 million a year, this is not where you want to see his production at. It's kind of staggering to see where he finished with 12 points, 19 assists, and 31 points in 55 games with a -2. So, again, these guys, and I guess while I'm on it, another guy could be Travis Connectny, obviously another huge contract extension given to him last year. 11 goals, 23 assists, and 34 points in 50 games with a -5. So if the Flyers are going to return to themselves the years prior, obviously they're going to need help from the back end. The goaltending is going to have to pick up. But when your two highest paid forwards in respect to Connectny and Hazer are producing at that low of a level, it's going to be pretty hard to get some confidence and traction in that room. But before we leave off here, Ryan, there's some young talent, and I do want to look at a bright side of this Flyers team. Obviously, starting with AV coming back, that's huge, and I fully expected him to come back. I don't think that right now, with the Flyers' past history of running through coaches like wildfire, is the right decision to fire him. I think he brings a lot of energy, a lot of intensity, and obviously a great hockey mind to the locker room. But at one point, these guys have to play. And when I point out the stats of these top level guys not producing like we expected them to, and the defense really being lackluster, it's kind of hard to put a lot of the onus and a lot of the blame on the coach when the team is not producing to anywhere near that they're capable of. And then the second point I do want to make is this young talent coming up. And as we pointed to, Joel Farabee leading the team in goals this year at the end. That's huge to see. I mean, he's a 22, 21-year-old kid, really bursting onto the scene, 20 goals, 18 points, 18 assists, 38 points. The only thing I would like to see from him is maybe a bit more consistency in his game next year. I felt like there were some times this year where he went on spurts where he would score, like the first game, I believe he had 3 or 4 points, and then he disappeared, and then he scored a hat trick, and then he disappeared, and then he came back on a little bit. So I would like to see a little more consistency from him. And then we were able to see the number 1 draft pick from the Flyers last year in Cam York. Morgan Frost, unfortunately, left the season with an injury. And then you have Tyson Foster. So just to throw it over to you, Ryan, before we do hop off the Flyers topic, what do you think of these young guys? Do you think Forrester, obviously a draft pick of last year, as well as Cam York from last year or 2 years ago, do you believe these guys have a chance to make the team? And upon making the team, do you think they have a chance to make an impact on this team next year?
Well, I think Cam York immediately will make an impact. I think the 3 games he played, he looked very, very confident. He played with a lot of heart, typical Flyers hockey. I mean, he drew some penalties as a young kid. I mean, what do you expect from him? he just came back from winning the gold medal against Canada, being captain of Team USA. So, the leadership will be there with him, and just being a young kid coming up, I think he'll make the team out of camp. And another young player that you forgot to mention is Wade Allison. I thought
Oh,
Wade
definitely.
Allison,
Wade Allison. Yep.
he played really, really good, and I loved him towards the end on the Hayes and Farabee line. I think if you look at that and you're Chuck Fletcher, you need to keep them together, and start building off that momentum. I think Tyson Foster, I think I saw last night he actually got hurt. He broke his collarbone in an
Oh,
AHL
wow.
game. So I don't know what his status will be if it needs to have surgery. And I'm curious to see too if OHL will have to have their own season, if he has to go play with them and something with those contracts, because we know that with COVID, the OHL didn't have their season. So, I mean, that's still a question to unfold. But I just want to go back to the whole Nolan Patrick situation that you brought up with him
Mhm.
being -30. I felt like, I was happy just as a fan and, being a former hockey player, he dealt with very, very like the migraines, and he played very scared. And you could really see that just as a hockey fan and just knowing the sport, he wouldn't go in those greasy areas and towards like maybe the end of the season. So I think me personally, I think Nolan Patrick played his last game as a Flyer. I think Seattle will pick him up. There's rumors now just because he got a new agent, and he's just unhappy with Philadelphia. And if and that kind of showed, and this city and this fan base, they'll get on him, and he's ruining an opportunity for a young kid to step up, and ultimately I just think Nolan Patrick's going to be on his way out, and I think he's either going to end up on Seattle, or the Flyers are just going to pay him and someone else is just going to pick him up. I just think he just needs a new change of scenery. And I'm just curious to see really how Chuck Fletcher handles this summer. It's a really, really big summer. As since he's been hired as a GM, he's just twiddles with his thumbs, in my opinion. He really hasn't done anything to produce and help this team. I mean, all his trades that he's made so far at the deadline, they're already playing on different teams. And I think one of them, in Ryan Hartman, he's in the playoffs right now with his Minnesota Wild, who Chuck Fletcher basically built that team up in Minnesota. And so, I mean, I'm just really, really curious to see how Chuck Fletcher handles this summer. He really needs to key in on the defense, number one. And, Jack Eichel, I want to throw out that name. He's very, very frustrated with Buffalo. And, the Flyers can't be wasting Drew's year. He's been playing phenomenal hockey, very under the radar the past 5 seasons, in my opinion. And I would hate to see us, meaning the Flyers, waste his career and not give him the cup that he deserves, similar to Hendrik Lundqvist and what they did up in New York with the Rangers. Just as a fan of Giroux, really needs to have this cup because he produces night in and night out for this team. He shows up when needed. Coots does the same thing, and we really saw the veterans step up. And lastly, I just want to end this note with the Flyers. Would we even be talking about this Flyers team having such a bad year if they didn't play in such a great, great division? I mean, you look at it in the Canada division, they're only 1 point out of the playoffs in that division, and then 5 points out of the West. So, I mean, give or take, I mean, the Flyers played in a really, really hard division. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It was a very, very tough division. In normal season, you're playing your divisional opponents 4 times. And, the Flyers were above 500 in all their division opponents. And I feel like the Flyers only struggled against Boston. But who cares? I mean, you play Boston 3 times a year in a normal season. And, if you snag a couple points, that's good. So the Flyers did play actually above 500 if it was a normal season against their division opponents. It was just typical Flyers, just to stay mediocre and, just around the 500 mark, 30 to 40 games. And, it didn't break it this season just because of how short it was. And, I just want to dive into this offseason with this team because it's going to be a make or break year. And just as a fan, I would just hate to see this rebuild continue and just not go anywhere. I feel like this team's at a fork in the road right now, and they really need to, decide really if they want to invest and send out all these draft picks to go get a sniper or a top defenseman, because you're really wasting these veterans that were doing great this year.
Yeah, and just to touch on your point there, Ryan, 3 of the top 10 teams in the league did finish in the top 10 in the league. My apologies. 3 of the teams out of the Mass Mutual division finished top 10 in the league, and that's the most out of any 4 divisions. Yeah, Pittsburgh 77, Washington 77, Boston at 73, and then two spots behind that, you have the New York Islanders finishing with 71 points. So again, to your point, a very competitive division. All the playoff teams finished in the top 12 in the entire league, which is pretty impressive. But, just moving on, moving to our last point here on the Flyers, and we're going to transition into the Phils. For the upcoming summer, the Flyers right now stand with $868,000 in cap space. They gave that extension to Scott Lawton not too long ago. So we'll see what they do on that front. They're obviously going to have to move some players and some money around to potentially sign anybody or to make a big trade, such as a Jack Eichel one. So a lot of news to come on that front. And the final one here, just for the upcoming NHL draft, the Flyers will pick in all 7 rounds. So that will be something to see. But moving on now here, Ryan, and let's go to a more positive note if we can, and that's going to be the Philadelphia Phillies. Obviously, they've given us our fair share of headaches this year with the inconsistencies to start out early in the season, but they got a great road and a much-needed road win or a series win, rather, against the Washington Nationals after falling 2-1 to the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, that second game in the Braves series, me, you, and Connor were all going back and forth. The bullpen just could not hold up their end of the bargain, and they unfortunately ended up losing that and then giving up another one on Sunday night to the Braves. But moving into their most recent series, is they are now down in Florida. They're going to kick it off against the Blue Jays tonight. Obviously, they're from Toronto, unable to play in Canada and have teams cross the border. So they're going to be playing down in Florida at their spring training facility. But Phil's win first game on Tuesday against the Nats 6-2, 5-2 on Wednesday. And then yesterday, they ended up dropping the final game of the series 5-1. And just for me, Ryan, just to start out here, I mean, this team looked so good the first 2 games. The bats were going. The pitching was really good. Obviously, as I alluded to, the scores there. I mean, they only let up 4 runs in 2 games and put up 11 runs in 2 games. And then they come out and lay a dud in game 3 against the Nats, the series closer there. For me, and watching this game, Patrick Corbin was just on his game all day, got out to first pitch strikes, and Phillies really, in my mind, didn't make any adjustments at all throughout that game. Corbin, 7 innings pitched, 5 hits, 1 earned run, and 9 strikeouts, no walks. And with a stat line like that, it's going to be nearly impossible to beat the opposing team. So for me, it's just, when these bats just go absolutely asleep, I just don't understand how you can have 2 great games like that and not really come out and perform the series finale and try to sweep there. A lot of guys going 0 for 4, 1 for 4, a lot of strikeouts, obviously. On the other end, the Phillies, Zach Eflin, 6 innings pitched, 7 hits, 5 earned runs, 2 walks, and 9 strikeouts. Eflin gave up 2 run home runs in the first inning, which gave the Nationals a 4-1 lead. But, Ryan, what would you say your main takeaway from this series is? A potential player you really have been impressed by lately, and what's your outlook here on this Toronto Blue Jays series as the Phils start tonight?
Well, I'm just going to start off with looking at this Washington series. I was honestly really happy with how this series unfolded. I wanted to see how this team would respond after that. They started off this 9-game road trip with a 12-2 win on Friday night against the Braves. And then, that Saturday game, dude, we really should have won that game. You're up 3 runs in the ninth, and you blow multiple leads, and then you lose Sunday night with Nola on the mound. And Nola, honestly, since he's been in the big leagues, just can't somehow pitch in Atlanta. And the bats just didn't show up as well. Freddie Freeman really started to rake for them. But I loved how this team responded against the Nationals. They really could have just looked at this national series and could have went 1-2, but they battled back and they came with the victory, a much needed victory on the road series win. And your leaders really stepped up with that. Harper leading off the game Tuesday night with the solo shot, And then, you had really good pitching from Anderson. I thought he gave you what you want out of a 4 or 5 guy in the rotation. And then Wednesday, I believe it was Vince Velasquez that pitched, or no, it was Zach Wheeler. I'm sorry. Zach
Yep.
Wheeler pitched, and he pitched another great game, and it really shouldn't have been 2-1. Harper and Herrera had that miscue out in the outfield. And, even to respond back, I mean, they were down 2-1 in the ninth, and then center field position, Herrera comes up and hits a shot. And that was a really great to see. He's starting to heat up the past couple of weeks. And then Eflin's been pitching great thus far this season. And, we saw this coming. Sadly, it happened against the Nationals and we couldn't go for the sweep. But just looking forward on this 9-game road trip, I would love to see this team come out above 500 on it. I think it's going to be huge for them just to build confidence. And honestly, I think in the back of their head, they're going to like that because they know they won't have to go back on the road and go back to Atlanta till late in the year. And they hate playing in Atlanta. Ever since that ballpark opened, somehow they just can't win games down there. And I think really they looked at it and you just have to go above 500 on this. And I'm just curious on. I'm going to throw this to you. What's up with Alec Bohm this year? He's just losing confidence, not seeing the ball. We see little spurts of him, kind of like Rhys Hoskins. Some games he's really hot on the ball. He'll come up in clutch situations, and then other nights he'll go like 0 for 3 with all Ks and stuff like that, and that's not seeing the ball. So I'm just going to throw this direction to you, and I brought it up to Connor. If Bohm's really struggling, and you're at this deadline, and you're a game and a half out of first, I don't think this team personally will make a wild card with just how good the National League is, especially looking at the NL West. And if the Cubs, let's say, for example, are playing 500 ball, they're out of the race. Chris Bryant's a free agent. Do you think, the Phillies, maybe with a struggling Alec Bohm, will pull the plug and try to get Chris Bryant? I just want to throw that out to you just because Bohm really hasn't been the player that we saw last year during the shortened season. I know it's a really early on in the season, but, I like this kid a lot. I want him to succeed, but right now, it's just I just don't see any confidence in him. And I feel like if you send him down to AAA, it's just going to hurt the kid.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I don't think they will trade him. I think it's a second season in the league. He didn't have a full season last year. I do see the concern. I gauge it there just because it is his technically second year in the league. So my argument could work against me where teams have seen him last year and this is the second time around and teams are figuring him out. But I don't think so. It is interesting that you compare him to Rhys Hoskins. Obviously, him and Rhys are two different players. I think Rhys is more of a long ball hitter, and he's swinging for the fences. You can really tell this year. Obviously, that has resulted in team lead in strikeouts with 49, and Bohm's right behind him with 41. But in that same breath, it does worry me a little bit because at least I know Hoskins is going for power and he can really elevate the ball when he gets a hold of it. He has 8 home runs, 20 RBIs, but for me, I think you got to give Bohm some time. Although he is a different player than Hoskins, he's more of a contact kind of guy. I think he's more of a, runners on base. He's a great guy to get up. I would even consider maybe moving him up in the lineup a little, give him a little bump, give him a little bit of confidence. Maybe let him feel out a different area in the order, see some different pitches, maybe hit with some men on base. Because he has put up a team, or I'm sorry, not a team lead. DD has 22 RBIs leading the team, but a second place in RBIs on the team with 20, which is also tied with Rhys Hoskins. So clearly he's proven that he comes up with timely hitting with 20 RBIs. So I wouldn't overreact in the sense of sending him down or trading him. But the 216 average does worry me a bit. I think he is more of a 270, 280. I think when he hits his prime of his career, he could even be a 280, 290 consistently type of guy. I just think he's that good. I think when he makes contact with the ball, that thing's soaring and it's an extra base hit potentially every time. So I would pump the brakes on the Alec Bohm, concern at this point. Obviously, it's something that we have to keep an eye on with 41 strikeouts and the type of player he is, as I alluded to. But, I don't think it's time to panic just yet. I think, maybe if he does continue to really downward spiral, you have to look at maybe sending him down. But for a free agent like Chris Bryant, I know Javier Baez is another name because he's a free agent at the end of this year. I believe Rizzo is obviously not held in as high regard as Baez and Bryant, just because he's a little older. But I think the Cubs are going to obviously deal some pieces at the deadline. They don't look like they're going to be a playoff team. But circling back to the Phils, I just personally think that you got to give Bohm time here, and he's proven that he can run or drive batters in. But shifting over now, let's go to the center field revolving door, if you would like to call it that. Obviously, Odubel Herrera, in my mind, is probably leading this race of who can be the starter here. He's had a lot of opportunity of getting there in the center field position, 17 games played. Through those 17 games, he's had 52 at-bats, 12 hits, big home run the other night, as you alluded to, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 11 strikeouts, and he's batting 231. So right now, I think Odubel will do in center field. He had a little run in with Bryce Harper yesterday, and that's going to come back with the feel of the game. I mean, he's been out of the major league level for 2 years, and was able to step back right in this year and has made a bit of an impact, I would argue. So I do like that from him, but I'll throw this to you, Ryan. Do you see a potential Mickey Moniak or a potential Kingery maybe when Hazley gets healthy? Do you see any of these guys maybe coming in and challenging them for the center field role? And how does Nick Maton sound to you in the center field? Is that a potential spot where he could go?
Well, I mean, I think I threw out the potential of even throwing Bryce Harper out there in center field and have Brad Miller out in right field. You could also look at that direction. I think Nick Maton, you just got to keep him in the infield, just especially being a young kid. He's producing very well. And, with Didi being hurt with this elbow thing, you're not fully confident if he can stay healthy throughout this whole full season of the major league. So I think you just have to keep Maton in the infield right now. And I think they're going to look. Joe Girardi's going to look at the center field position, and it's whoever honestly has the hot hand right now. And right now, it's a duel. You have to give credit where credit's due, and he's. It took him a couple weeks to see the ball, but in all honesty, he hasn't played in 2 years. It's going to take some time. He got some at bats in spring training, but it's spring training. Like, what do you expect? And then all honesty, like, I mean, he really helped you win that game, the game 2 against the Nationals. If it wasn't for that clutch hit, we're talking about another series loss that was out the door on the road by this Phillies team. So ultimately, I think it's just going to be Herrera, and it's going to be whoever's hot. I just saw a report today that Adam Hazley went back down to Clearwater, so he's finally returned to the team after his leave of absence. So that's another name you really have to throw into the mix. But right now, I think this team, bottom line, and we're going to segue to this other point, is just the bullpen. And it's been ongoing problem for this team. But you look at this, they're just not healthy. And when they were healthy for the first 2 weeks, we saw how dominant this bullpen could be. And that's when the Phillies started off with that really great record. And then the sweep of the Braves. But that was with a healthy bullpen. And they've been hurt ever since Bradley went down, I think, on the first road series of this season. So I think once we get these players back in the bullpen, we'll be fine. And, I think another point too is, this Phillies team is really, really great playing at the bank. And I think whenever they already stated that they're going to get fans back to full capacity, I think mid-June, whenever the Yankees are in town. And I think if this team can just play 500 ball on the road, I'll be all right if they can just stay at 500 or even just on a 4-game road trip and just go maybe like 1-3 or something like that. But I think you're really going to have to key into these home games. And I think they're going to ride off that momentum of the crowd noise. And we saw that Saturday whenever the Phillies blew those leads. I mean, Atlanta had a full crowd. So hopefully this team can, really stay in the playoff hunt throughout the summer. And I believe they will. And they can ride off the fans' momentum because, this Phillies team is really, really hungry to make the playoffs. They haven't made the playoffs in 10 years. And I'm excited to talk about this Phillies team. And another point I want to make before we wrap up is I think this is Bryce Harper's best year, just overall. just as a player and just being an MLB fan, he doesn't get pitched like how he used to whenever he won the MVP. He doesn't get a fastball anymore. His approach is very different. You're seeing him squat more on an 0-2 and just to poke the ball and play. He's not going for the home run ball. Overall, he just wants to be, that three-way player that, that he wants to be. And, he's having a really MVP year that no one really is talking about in the MLB just because of how hot Acuna is down in Atlanta. And all honesty, I think if Harper can continue to play like how he is, it's just going to be a trickle domino effect with this team. The bullpen can just stay average. We have a lot of home games this summer, and if the Phillies can win these home games, stay in this race in the NL East, it's going to be exciting times. And they're going to have to make a move at the deadline. And if they don't, I don't see this team making the playoffs. But if they do make the right moves at the deadline, this team it's going to be a fun time to watch. And I look at this team related to the 017 that had that stretch against the Mets like towards the end of the season. So I'm curious to see how this season unfolds, and it's just going to have to start with the leaders and number one, Bryce Harper.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, I mean, Bryce Harper really is having an MVP year, and I would argue maybe even his best hitting year. Obviously, we're still early; we have months to go until the season ends. But right now, he's batting 306, on base percentage of a 427, slugging percentage 565, and OPS 992, 7 home runs, 11 RBI. So great year from Harper so far, and before we do move on to my next point, kind of funny, how I'm saying Bohm is more of a contact hitter than Hoskins. And in my mind, I really believe that just the way they swing and just the way their approaches are. But Rhys Hoskins leads the Philadelphia Phillies right now with 34 hits. So that was an interesting stat to me. But let's transition now into the Blue Jays series here, Ryan. And really different Blue Jays team than we've seen in the past. I mean, they've added some names. You got George Springer, you got Hinchin Ryu at the top of that rotation. You have some young guys like Bo Bichette, Vladdy Guerrero Jr., you have Biggio there. So they have a pretty good team. And in the last 5 games, they're 4-1. They got the big sweep against the Phillies division rival, the Atlanta Braves in Atlanta. So that's impressive in itself. And then those other 2 games were a 7-4 loss to the Astros and then an 8-4 win against the Astros. So this team has proven that they can play. There's no denying that, and it's going to be a tough task for the Phils. Now, again, they're on the road. Obviously, their road woes have been following them not only from this season but prior seasons. And on the hill this week for the Phils, it's going to be Vinny V tonight. We're recording this on Friday night, so he's going to start tonight. Today, I guess, which would be tomorrow night. Saturday, Aaron Nola is going to get it. And then to close the series out Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock will be Chase Anderson. So, obviously on the front and back end of this, there's a little concern. I would even argue that there's a little concern with Nola right now. He hasn't really shown to be a top level arm right now. He's 3-2, not having a spectacular year by any means. In my opinion, I think Zach Wheeler would be the head of this rotation. If it wasn't for Nola's seniority and being in Philadelphia as long as he has. But going into this series, Ryan, what's the biggest thing that you're looking for the Phils to either build on or get going? And what would be one player that you're really looking at?
Well, I mean, just to talk about this series, I'm curious to see how Joe Girardi handles it with the DH, since it's an American League interleague play. We're going to see the DH, and
That's a good point.
It's Friday. We're recording this on Friday, like you said, but tonight's lineup for Friday night, it just got released. We're looking at Andrew McCutchen, Segura, Bryce Harper, and at the 4, you're gonna like this. I think this is a really good Phillies fans. JT's at the 4-hole DH.
Like that.
Rhys Hoskins, Bohm, Herrera, Knapp, and Maton. So I think with the pitchers going, I think we're going to see a lot of runs this weekend. We saw that last year too when we played the Blue Jays. It was either a really close game or it was like a 15-12, for example, final. It was really high scoring. And the guy going tonight, Mats, I think, for the Blue Jays, is a former Mets.
Steve
And
Matz, yep.
yeah, and he's really struggled against the Phillies for somehow in his career. So I want this Phillies team, just to be hungry and look at, this is a potential to have a plus 500 road trip, and I think that's huge. One of the longest road trips of the year, early on in the season, and just to really like that domino effect that I alluded to earlier. So I think we're gonna see a lot of runs this weekend. And I want to see this Phillies team. I think they have the potential to, win 2 out of 3 again. Tonight scares me because the inconsistency with Vinny V. He's been great thus far. Stepping in that role for Matt Moore. He's giving you 4 or 5 innings, keeping you in ball games. And you alluded to Nola struggling. I think just with the whole Nola struggling, it's just playing in Atlanta for some reason. It's really not a pitcher-friendly park. We've been seeing that ball carry a lot. And, if Nola doesn't have his curveball rolling, it's, you're going to have to score more than 3 runs if you're the Phillies to win a game if his curveball's not rolling. So I look at this weekend, and I think that if you're the Phillies, you look at it, potential 500 trip, and, you just ride off that momentum. And one player I want to look at is to see how Bohm responds. Maybe a change in scenery. He didn't. John Kruk stated he never faced John Lester and some of these pitchers for the Nationals. So maybe a change of scenery would be great for Bohm in a new ballpark, smaller just because it is a spring training field and site that they're playing at in Florida. So I'm just curious to see how he responds. And just look at this lineup. I'm just gonna expect to see a lot of runs, and I allude to the DH position with it being huge with JT after he took that foul tip off the kneecap and having the COVID-related issues. So that's great to see him in the lineup. So just overall, the one player I want to look to is Bohm, and I think this Phillies team will win 2 out of 3. Just Friday night scares me, and Sunday scares me, but I'm confident in Nola going on Saturday.
I like that. And again, the Phillies are in action this week against the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, we're recording this on Friday. We're going to release it on Saturday. They'll get that going tonight. We'll have Vinny V on the mound, Aaron Nola tomorrow night, and Sunday wrapping it up, Chase Anderson. For me, I'm going to go Phil's only taking 1 of the 3 here. I just wasn't really happy with the performance they gave against the Nats the other day. I feel like it was just a lackluster performance. When you're there and you have the stranglehold on a divisional opponent, and especially when you need road wins at a premium, you really need to take advantage of that and build off the momentum that you built in prior games. So I'm not really too confident in this team going down to Florida. I think this Toronto team's really hot. And I think for them to get the win tomorrow, they're really going to have to play well. Before we move on to the 76ers, just want to put this out there. Philadelphia Phillies sitting at 20-18 right now, second in the NL East, game and a half back of the Mets. They are 13-6 at home, 7-12 on the road, and they have been 7-3 in their last 10, which is phenomenal. However, the New York Mets are 18-13. They lead the division, 11-4 at home, and they've had a bit of struggles on their road trips as well, as they are 7-9. Really, this whole NL East has had trouble on the road. Braves are 8-9, Marlins are 9-11, and the Nationals are 5-9. So a lot to look forward here. Again, Phillies in action against the Blue Jays this weekend. But now we're going to segue into, I would say, the happiest and the hottest team in the city of Philadelphia. That's going to be the Philadelphia 76ers. They will play tonight. Again, for anyone who just tuned in, we are recording this on Friday, dropping Saturday. So they'll play tonight against the Orlando Magic. Their magic number is 1 to clinch that number 1 seed. They've obviously been playing around a little bit, losing their last 2 games. Last night to the Miami Heat. This will be Thursday night, lost to the Miami Heat 106-94. And then on Tuesday, losing to the Pacers 103-94. So, Connor and I went over this, Ryan, on our show previously. The Sixers entered into May with 9 games. I said if they went anything below 6-3, it would be a disappointment. I personally expected them to go 7-2, but right now they sit at 5-2 7 games through the 9 games in May, and obviously these 2 games left against the Magic. A lot going on with this team right now, and they're gonna have to string it together. 2 games, and yesterday kind of got out of control. You had Joel Embiid getting into some, back and forth. Udonis Haslem hasn't played all year. He comes out, plays 6 minutes, puts up 4 points, and he's ejected. So he did his job of getting this Sixers team involved in the stuff they really shouldn't have been involved in. They should be focused on the game and on the task at hand, which is securing that number 1 seed. So for me, I would really like this team to finish on a 2-0 note. Obviously, the Magic are not a good opponent at all. I believe they're going to be in the top 3 for a draft pick. But I think these 2 games are really important. They need this momentum. I think whoever they play in the first round, and God, I hope it's not the Celtics, is going to present them a pretty tough challenge. And it only gets harder from there. A potential second round matchup I saw this morning was against the Miami Heat. Obviously, they dropped the game against the Miami Heat the other night. And they got a good team. They match up pretty well against the Sixers as well as the Milwaukee Bucks. So I think this Heat team can make some noise, but I'll throw it over to you, Ryan. What do you make of this Sixers team right now, and how much confidence do you have in them heading into these final 2 games? Got to get through these first, and then into the NBA playoffs.
I think really right now the Sixers team just wants to play playoff basketball, and we saw that last night. In that Miami Heat game, I couldn't watch it, but I just watched highlights after. And that Miami Heat team, it was like 2K with them. They shot 70% after the first quarter or first half. I forget like what it was. I mean, they were hitting everything. So you're not
I don't mean to interrupt you. I believe there were 4 of 10 from 3-point in the first half, which I mean, I believe 40% from 3-point isn't terrible. I mean, it's still
average, I think.
Above average. Yep. Yeah. Go on though. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's all right. And I just think that Miami Heat team really looked at it as they don't want to play the Bucks or the Nets in the second round. I feel like they're more comfortable, and maybe the Jimmy Butler effect too of looking at it as, oh, you can play the Sixers in the second round, and with Jimmy Butler being a former Sixer, and I know that the Sixers team kind of changed around, so maybe Jimmy Butler can he knows a certain way around these players, just with playing with them 2 years ago. And we saw last year in the bubble that this Miami Heat team, whenever they're hot, they are very, very dominant. Their players step up into their roles. So me personally, I think the Sixers team, they just want to play playoff basketball now. Doc Rivers, some games, even against the Indiana game, I believe it was either Tuesday or Wednesday night when we just had Ben Simmons, Doc kind of didn't coach. You really saw it, especially towards the end of the game. So I think maybe we're not seeing the full potential of this Sixers team just quite yet really unfold, because we have key players that are hurt, especially off our bench. Matisse Thybulle, in my opinion, is a top 5 defensive player in this league, and he's your bench player. So he's easily going to be your 7th or even potentially 6th guy off the bench. Korkmaz is hurt. Shake Milton's hurt. We won't have Dwight Howard tonight because he is suspended because he reached a technical foul limit with the NBA. So I just think once the Sixers team locks up this 1 seed, I think they're really going to sit down and digest it, because right away, especially with this year's NBA playoff format, is you're going to play a really, really hot team similar to the March Madness, like the first 4 in, and we saw what UCLA just did in March Madness. They played in the play-in seed, and then they got hot. So this Sixers team, whoever they play in the first round, and I hope it's not Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it will be Boston, just because Boston losing Jaylen Brown.
Even Washington's looking a little scary with Russ and Bradley Beal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you with that. And potentially, I mean, this Sixers team could potentially have an easy route, I would say, to the Eastern Finals once they get this 1 seed, because I was also looking at it as, if the Hawks lose or something, that we could potentially play the Hawks or the Knicks in the second round. And the Sixers the past couple of years have been very, very dominant against the Knicks teams and the Hawks team. I mean, we just blew out the Hawks a couple of weeks ago.
Back to back, yep.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. So like I said, I think the Sixers team, once they get this 1 seed, I'm happy, we're seeing Ben play throughout this, and we're really not resting any players because, in all honesty, I think the Sixers team easily could have clinched the 1 seed, but I think they just wanted to ease their way into the playoffs and really sit down. And I think at the end of the day, the Sixers have the better coach in the East, and I think Doc Rivers, we're really going to see as Sixers fans that the impact that he makes compared to Brett Brown immediately right away in the playoffs. And we look at this Brooklyn team with their scary three, with having a rookie head coach and Steve Nash. He's really not coaching them. He's just telling them it's like street ball. You three kind of run the show and do what you want. So just being as a Sixers fan, COVID restrictions are getting lifted too. I think having this 1 seed is going to be huge for this team and this city, and just some glory of hope. That we sat through the Sam Hinkie in the process. We sat through Embiid missing a year, Ben Simmons missing a year, waiting for Korkmaz to come overseas. Shipping out Dario, Covington, T.J. McConnell. We sat through all this just to see a day where the Sixers team can get the 1 seed. And I think if they get the 1 seed and they can stay healthy, and with fans getting more and more into the Wells Fargo Center, I think I really, really like their chances, especially with the Lakers being hurt.
Yeah, and it is a good point you bring up, Ryan, because the Sixers haven't had the 1 seed and since their finals appearance back in 2000 against the LA Lakers, obviously getting blown out there. But there is some importance to this, and it feels like there's not as much hype around it just because this team's expectations are so high. Obviously, with the players they have and the coach and Doc Rivers, even the assistant coaching with Sam Cassell, and the front office operations being run by Daryl Morey. So before we segue off this Sixers topic, and real quick for our listeners, we are actually going to have a special guest next week come on before the NBA playoffs. So make sure you tune in for that. We'll be talking all Sixers with him. But one player that you're excited to see, Ryan, and one player that you're hoping that can really pick it up here before the playoffs for the Sixers team. Let's just go real quick. I'm going to start it off. I'm going to go to Tobias Harris. I'm really excited to see him come into the playoffs. Had 3 incredible games, the last 3. Posting 21 against the Heat, 27 against the Pacers, and 18 against the Pistons. I just think Doc Rivers brings a different play out of this guy, different presence of mind around the basket, and he's really looked like a different player, not only these past 3 games, but this entire year. And he is a max level player. He's getting paid that money, so we do expect that out of him. But after last year, it's good to see him kind of rebound and get back to the player that we thought we were getting when we acquired him from LA. And then the one guy I do want to see step up, and this isn't due to his regular season play so much. It's just due to his history in the playoffs, and that's going to be Ben Simmons. Tobias Harris is a great piece to have. I think he can do some things for you in the playoffs, but I think the more central point and the more focus is going to be on Ben Simmons. And if he can alleviate some of the pressure from Embiid and let him do work down low, and he can spread the floor and be effective, maybe take a few shots. I know I'm being, real optimistic when I say that. I think the Sixers team is going to have a really good shot at going deep. But throwing over to you, Ryan, who's one guy that you're excited to see in the playoffs for those Sixers, and one guy that you want to see a little more heading into the playoffs?
Well, I want to agree with you with the whole Tobias Harris thing. I think he's going to look at this postseason and be very hungry because I'm just going to be blunt with this. The Sixers left Tobias Harris out to dry in the bubble. He was really playing every position, it seemed like, when we did get swept by the Boston Celtics. So I feel like if he can just sit down and play his role, we're going to see a very, very dominant Tobias Harris. I'm curious to see how Joel Embiid will play in the postseason. That's another name to watch because he's had an MVP caliber season. In my opinion, he should be the MVP. Just because if the Sixers do get the 1 seed and the impact that he made onto them. And another point I want to make is I want to see the veterans step up to that as well, bringing in Danny Green and Curry, George Hill, Dwight Howard. I just want to see how they step into it, into play. And I would have to agree with you with Ben Simmons. I just want to see how he plays into this role and into the postseason offensively. We know he's a great defensive player, But what happens if they're going to start doubling Embiid? Maybe we can get an easy layup with Ben Simmons. So I think if Ben Simmons has a shaky postseason, and I'm going to drop a hot take, I think if Ben Simmons has a shaky postseason, I wouldn't be surprised if teams are going to start calling to the Sixers and offer some players and try to get a trade, because I think the Sixers team window to win a finals is right now, and I would say 23-24. They have to win a title around that range.
I agree, and now before we get off this point, I agree, Ryan. In that sense, I think if Simmons doesn't really produce, Sixers get bounced early this year. They took care of the coaching need. I think it falls on the players this year, much like the dynamic of the Flyers. I think something needs to change in the locker room, and I could see if they get the right package, possibly Ben Simmons being on his way out. But hopefully that is not the case, and the Sixers can get this number one seed and make a deep run in the playoffs. The play-in tournament will begin next week. That will just be the 7, 8, 9, and 10 seeds from the East and Western Conference. So that'll get underway next week. But now segueing into a very I guess you could say optimistic, happy, looking forward sort of topic. The Philadelphia Eagles. This is a big moment for us Philadelphia fans and really football fans all over. The NFL schedule was released this week. And Ryan and I, just to wrap the show up here, are going to just take a little dive into it. Nothing too serious. As some more stuff comes out, we'll dive a little deeper. But the first thing, Ryan, I do just want to jump into is that really stuck out to me. No Sunday night games for the Philadelphia Eagles this year, which was very disrespectful. I don't know if they're that bad of a team. I think they deserve maybe one against a division opponent, but let's dive into the schedule here. First, the Eagles will be leading the season off, or opening the season off, rather, against the Atlanta Falcons. That will be in Atlanta. Then they will be home against the 49ers. Then they will again be home against the Cowboys, on the road against the Panthers and Chiefs, at home against the Buccaneers. Then a little Las Vegas trip. They're going to go out to Vegas. I believe that's going to be week 7.
I hate to interrupt. The Eagles fans that's going to be a home game for the Eagles fans.
Oh, yeah.
Something how when the Chargers were playing in that soccer stadium in LA. I'm going to love week 7's game.
Everyone's going to love that one. And that will be a 4:05 actual start in Las Vegas. Then they'll travel up to Detroit, take on the Lions. Then they will come home against the Chargers, go on the road against Denver, come home for the Saints, then go on the road, play at MetLife 2 weekends in a row against the Giants and the Jets. And then they'll be home against Washington and the Giants. And then they will be on the road against Washington and the Cowboys to wrap the season up. So pretty interesting here. Just a first look at the schedule. The Eagles' last 6 games, 5 of them are against division opponents. The one team that is not the division opponent is the New York Jets, but a lot of chance there to make this division interesting at the end of the season. And before I throw it over to you, Ryan, I think this team's going to finish, and this is an early projection, I'm going to go 7-9. And I think they're going to get a decently big win against the Giants towards the end of the season. I believe that's going to be week 15. But right now, how this team looks, I just don't know. I'm around the 7-9, 8-8 range. As we get closer to the season, I'll obviously probably adjust those numbers, but I definitely don't think they surpass 10. I think they stay anywhere between that 7-9 win range.
Well, and it's also curious to look at the schedule unfold too, because they added an extra game. So we're actually playing week 18. And you alluded to all those divisional games at the tail end. And 3 of those 5 games are going to be at the Link. And, if the Eagles are in the hunt, the city of Philadelphia already said that they expect to have full capacity at the Link. It's going to be rowdy there if they're in the hunt. And especially playing the Giants, who are still crying about us taking Devontae Smith. If you really wanted Devontae Smith, they could have traded up for him. But
they could have.
And they're still salty that we took out Jalen Hurts at the end of the year. So they couldn't make the postseason. Whoop-de-doo. So I'm curious, and I'm really circling into week 12 and week 16 when we play the Giants. I think if we can go 2-0 against them, I don't care if we lose every single game. I just want to beat the Giants. I think, if
Love the
you're
mindset.
a fan, you can really look at it. But, it's a really, honestly, I think they have the easiest schedule dating back to last year's record opponent.
Yep.
And I liked how young this team is too, because I think the young factor is going to play a big, big role because this Eagles team has history problems. And with having a week 14 bye, I think having the young players is going to play a key role into this team. And ultimately, I think I could see this Eagles team, making the playoffs. It depends how the NFC East really unfolds. If it's another year like how it was last year, those divisional games at the tail end of the season is going to be make or break with the Eagles. So I think they'll be in it till December. We're going to talk about this Eagles team being in it till December, in my opinion. But I think just overall, it's really, really hard to judge it just because we don't know the full roster yet. We're not really confident. Sounds like they weren't confident in Jalen Hurts before the draft, but then bringing in Devontae Smith, is really showing everyone that, the Eagles are all in with him. So, I mean, the first month and a half of this Eagles team, they're probably going to start probably 2-4 or maybe 0-6. Just I could really, really see it with how brutal the schedule is to really to begin the season with, new house in charge and everything. And just one more stat. So T.O. stated today, he was asked who will win the NFC East. And he said, no, if the Cowboys were going to win the NFC East, and he goes, no, Eagles will win. So just as an Eagles fan, you just love to see it. And maybe he's seeing something that we don't, just being a former player with this Eagles team and, cleaning out house. So I'm just excited. I thought Howie Roseman had a great draft, but you really can't grade last year's draft for another 2 to 3 years. So like I said, I'm just excited. Talk about some Eagles football and a full pack Lincoln Financial Field that will play an impact, in my opinion. And of course around the NFL as well, having full stadiums and the impact of this team.
Most definitely. And again, Ryan Powell joining me today. Connor could not make it as he is graduating today. So congratulations to Connor and him wrapping everything up at WCU. But that's going to wrap it up for us here on the Connor and Mark Show. Again, Ryan Powell stepping in today. Thanks a lot, buddy, for stopping by. Great talking some sports with you. Again, Phils are in action tonight as we're recording this on Saturday. They will be in action tonight against Toronto, 3-game series. Flyers wrap their season up and some disappointment on that front. And the Sixers will start out the playoffs. Hopefully they get that win, that one win they need to lock up the number 1 seed. But I believe the playoffs will start roughly a week and a half from now. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that and keep that covered. And finally, wrapped it up with a little Eagles schedule review. But again, thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to give us a like to keep up with all our content. Big guests coming on next week to talk some Sixers basketball and to preview the playoffs. But for now, we're going to sign off. And thank you again, everybody, for tuning in.